Masechet Makkot Daf Vav Nu Mishnah Al Pi Shenayim Aidim or Shelosha Aidim Yumat Hamet. The pasuk in Devarim 17 says that it's based on the testimony of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses. If they testify that someone deserves capital punishment, then you give capital punishment. So now we add. The Mishnah asks, Imit kemet adut b'shnayim lama parata katu b'shlosha. If you can verify testimony based on just 2 witnesses, then why is it pasuk bother saying 3? 2 is the minimum. 1 is not enough. 2 is enough, and if you have more, then that's also good. Obviously, if you have more, then that's even more verifiable. So why mention 3? Ela laki shelosha lishnayim, ma shelosha mizimin et hashenayim, af hashenayim yazomu et hashelosha, uminayin afilu me'a tamod omad edim. It's in order to compare 3 witnesses to 2 witnesses. Just like 3 witnesses can be edim mizimin for 2 witnesses, so 2 can be edim mizimin for 3, and even for 100, as the pasuk says, edim. In other words, certainly if the original, the first set of witnesses are 2, and then the second set of witnesses are 3 people that say, no, these first 2, they were with us in Chicago, so the 3 is more than 2, for sure, you would believe the 3 over the 2. The chidush here is even the other way around. If the original set of witnesses were 3 or 5 or 100, and then 2 witnesses come and say, oh, that group of witnesses, they were with us somewhere else, that you follow, you trust the later second group of witnesses, even though there are only 2, and we disqualify and even punish the entire 3 or more sets of witnesses that testified about the defendant in the first place. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Ma shenayim enan neheragin ad shehiyu shnehem zomemin, af shelosha enan neheragin ad shehiyu sheloshtam zomemin. Uminayin afilu me'a tamod omar edim. Rabbi Shimon has a different derivation, something else to learn from the fact that it's 2, and the pasuk says 2 witnesses and 3 witnesses. Just like 2 witnesses are not killed until both of them are found to be edim zomemin. That's what we just saw. And at the end of the previous sugya, so 3 witnesses will not get capital punishment unless all 3 are found to be ayadim zomamin. And how do you know even 100? As the pasuk says ayadim, which is simply plural, and that means no matter how many. So if you have 3 witnesses, and then they're the first set of witnesses, they testified about this defendant that he deserves capital punishment. A second set of witnesses, let's say they say, listen, 2 out of these 3 were with us in the baseball game in Chicago. The other one they don't say anything about. Okay, so in that case, we don't give capital punishment to any of the first set of witnesses because you don't give them that reciprocal punishment until everyone in the group is found to be adim zomamin, and if it's 100, well, that probably will be very difficult to do, to say that everybody, all those 100 were with, unless they're all in a group, they're all together, they're a team or something. So that's what Rabbi Shimon learns from it. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Lo ba shelishi lakel ela lachmir alav, velasot dino kayose be'elu. Rabbi Akiva says that the pasuk mentions 3 witnesses not to be lenient. You see, this interpretation would be a leniency, because if you have only 2, and these 2 become edim zomin, they both get capital punishment. By adding a 3rd person, and if that 3rd person is not found to be ed zomem, he kind of saves the other 2 friends. So Rabbi Akiva says, no, this 3rd is not coming to be lenient, but rather to be stringent, to teach us that the 3rd one, if indeed all 3 are found to be edim zomemin, then all 3 get capital punishment, and the 3rd one, let's say they testified in order. First came Mr. A, then Mr. B, then Mr. C. Mr. C cannot say, wait a second, you would have killed that defendant based on the testimony of just 2 witnesses. You didn't even need my testimony. I could have sat it out. Now I decided, okay, I'm going to testify too, but since you would have killed him anyway based on testimony A and B, therefore C might argue, I don't get capital punishment because my testimony was not the critical factor. It wasn't needed. Rabbi Akiva says this. Therefore, the pasuk comes to teach us 2 or 3 witnesses, to say that if they're part of the group, as many witnesses as there are, and they're all found to be edim zomin, that they weren't there, they all get capital punishment, even though only 2 of them were actually necessary to give the defendant a punishment. ואם כן ענה שכתוב לנתבע לו עוברי עבירה כעוברי עבירה, על אחת כמה וכמה ישלם שכר לנתבע לו עושה מצווה כעושה מצווה. Now we learn a moral lesson from this law of Rabbi Akiva. If the pasuk comes and punishes in someone associated with transgressors, like the transgressors themselves. In this case, the first two witnesses that testified falsely against a person, they are the main transgressors because they, based on their testimony alone, we would have falsely killed this defendant. But the third one is just adding on. He's an associate to it, and yet he also gets capital punishment. If that's true for the negative, then all the more so for the positive. That, let's say there's a couple of people, they're going to do a mitzvah. They're going to go visit a sick person. And you're like, you know what, I'll come along for the ride. You don't really need him, but he says he'll come along. And so he comes along, then he also gets reward for that, like the original two people that were doing the major part of the mitzvah. So it's always good to associate with good people and not with bad people. ומה שניים נמצא אחד מהן קרוב ופסול עדותן בטלה, אף שלושה נמצא אחד מהן קרוב ופסול עדותן בטלה. And another thing we learned from the comparison of 2 and 3 is that just like if you have just two witnesses, and it turns out one of them is a relative of the defendant or one of the parties, or one of them is not disqualified, he's a gambler. So in that case, even if only one of them is found to be disqualified, the whole set, we throw out the entire testimony. So too, that even if there's 3 witnesses and one of them is found to be a relative or a disqualified witness, we throw out the whole group. Even though if you take out one of the 3, you still have 2 valid witnesses left. But we don't say, well, just forget about the one and keep the other 2. Since they come as a group, we treat it like a group and we throw out the whole thing. And even if it's 100 witnesses come and they all testify together that they saw a certain thing, and one of them is found to be disqualified, then the entire group is thrown out. אמר רבי יוסף, במה דברים אמורים בדיני נפשות, אבל בדיני ממונות תתקיים העדות בשעה. Rabbi Yosef disagrees partially. He said, when do we throw out the whole thing? If it's a capital case. If you have a capital, 100 people, let's say something happened in public, there was a murder in public, in the middle of the town square. 100 people saw it, and they all come together and testify. But one of those 100 is disqualified to be a witness. We throw out the entire testimony because when it comes to capital punishment, we always look for any possible reason why we should save the defendant. But if it's a monetary case, well then there's 2 people, and if you're going to be stringent on one, it's lenient on the other. So we have to be totally fair. And since there are 3 or more witnesses and only one of them is no good, we could throw out that one, and as long as we still have 2 left, we can fulfill their testimony. Rabbi Omer, echad dinei modot v'echad dinei nevashot. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, however, says no. It's true for monetary cases and capital cases. Since they all came as a group, and part of the group is no good, then the whole group is no good. Ve'ematai bizman shehitru bahen, ava bizman she'lo hitru bahen, ma ya'asu shene'achim shera'u be'echad she'harag et hanefesh. And when do we throw out a whole group when one of them is no good? Only if the witnesses had given a forewarning to the defendant and told him, listen, what you're about to do, you're about to violate Shabbat. And by cooking this egg on Shabbat, don't you know, you'll be violating Shabbat and Sekila and so on. And they gave a warning. Since they gave a warning, so all the people that gave a warning, it's obvious that they chose to be witnesses. They are standing there as official witnesses. And since they know that they're being witnesses, and if one of them is no good, then the whole group gets disqualified. But if they did not give a forewarning, they just happened to see it. I don't know, someone's running down the block and he kills someone else. And there's people that are on the other side of the street and they all notice it. And it happens to be 2 brothers. So what will 2 brothers do if they happen to see it? So they're not standing there to be official witnesses and calling out as a warning. They just happen to see it. Since they did not call out a forewarning, but rather just saw it, so they're seeing it as individuals. Since they saw it as individuals, since they're related to each other, so they can't both testify, so one of them can sit it out, and the other one can testify, since they did not declare themselves to both be witnesses, and then if they're both witnesses, they have to come together, and then they disqualify each other. But if they did not declare themselves to be witnesses, one can sit it out, and then the other one, together with someone unrelated, will be able to come and testify. testify. Amar Rava, vehu sheha'idu kulam betoch kedei dibur. Rava says that when the Mishnah said that 2 witnesses are the same as 3 witnesses, or even the same as 100 witnesses, we saw that in the first few clauses of the Mishnah. And let's focus on Rabbi Shimon, who said that just like 2, you only give them capital punishment when both of them are edim zomin. So too 3. All 3 of them have to be edim zomin, and even 100. If they come as a group, 100 people come as a group, they're all testifying about the very same thing, and they're testifying together, then none of them would get capital punishment unless all of them were found to be edim zomemin. That means another set of witnesses came and said, we saw all 100 of these people somewhere else, and they could not have been witnesses. So Rava says about that we only consider them a group if they testify within a very short time, the time required to speak and say, Shalom Alecha Rabbi, which is a very short time. But if there's space in between, then they're considered separate groups. So let's say you had 2 people come now, and then in an hour, another 2 witnesses come. So then they're considered 2 separate groups. And if the first 2 become Edim Zomamin, then they are killed, even though the other 2 weren't, because the other 2 are not part of the group. But if they all came together at the same time, all 4, within this time span, then if only 2 of them became edim zomamin, then none of them would be killed, because you need all of them in the group. אמר לרב אחא מדפתי לרבינה, מחידי תוך כדי דיבור איך ידמה כדי שאלת תמיד לרב, מעט ובאהבו. A question, רב אחא מדפתי אס רבינה, what does it mean תוך כדי דיבור? It means enough time for a student to greet a master and say Shalom Alecha Rabbi, which is only a couple of seconds. Now the Mishnah said, even if you have 100 witnesses, how would it be possible for 100 witnesses to testify within 3 seconds, even if they talked as fast as possible? So how could you say it's such a short time? And Ravina explained, Kol chad vechad betoch kedei dibur shel chavero. When we say a short time, it means between one witness and the next. Each witness, they might go on for a half hour talking about what they saw. That's okay. They could go on for as long as they want. Once one stops, we need the next one to come immediately and say, I also saw, and then he says what he said. So 100 witnesses might take a few hours, but between each witness, there shouldn't be a delay of more than a very short time. Rabbi Akiva Omer, lo ba shelishi v'chule ma shenayim. And now we quote the continuation of the Mishnah, where Rabbi Akiva says this is not a kula, but rather a chumrah, to say that even though the third one wasn't necessary for the testimony, because we could make someone guilty based on 2. But if there are 3 people, or as many people as there are, then and they're found to be edim zomin, they all get capital punishment. You can't say, well, you didn't need me for guilt, he's also killed. And then it goes on to say that just like with regard when you have 2 witnesses and one of them is a relative or is pasul because he's a gambler or for whatever reason he's pasul, then we throw out that whole set. So too, if there's 3 witnesses and one of them is not a good witness, we throw out the whole group. And even if there's 100 witnesses and 99 good witnesses, but 1 witness that's a relative or who's not qualified, then all of the testimony is thrown out. So we say about that, Amar le Papa Abaye, Ela me'ata haru yasil. Papa asks Abaye. So according to that, a victim of a murder should be able to spare the murderer, because the victim of the murder is a witness. Now, it's true, he happens to now be dead because he was just killed. But let's say, theoretically, that he stay alive enough for enough time that he could come and he could be a witness. He is a witness there. He's present, and he is related to himself, and he's one of the parties that's involved. And so, in an example like that, you wouldn't be able to kill the murderer because one of the people, let's say there's 2 other witnesses that all saw this murder, so they come, and the murder victim is also happened to be there, and he is disqualified, so he'll disqualify everybody else who is there, so then you could never kill a murderer. And the answer is kisharagom ahorav. Oh, well, you're right. Maybe we can only kill a murderer when the murderer stabs the victim in the back. In that case, the victim did not see who killed him, so wouldn't be able to testify. In that case, the other 2 witnesses that saw it, or however many they are all unrelated, and good witnesses so they could testify. But indeed, if so you stab someone from the front and the victim himself sees what's going on, then he would be related and would disqualify the whole group. And now, how about a different case? Nirba yasil. Rav Papa asks Abaye, what if someone is a victim of homosexual rape? So that victim, he would be a witness to see this crime that was done against him. And since he's related to himself, he can't be a witness, but he's present, he's there, and he lives to tell about it. And so even if there's two other people that witnessed this, then since there are three altogether, but one of them is a disqualified witness, then he will disqualify the other witnesses, and then we couldn't give punishment to the rapist. What would you say about that? And the answer is, he did the act from behind, so that the victim didn't see who committed this crime against them. Well, it was not able to be a witness. In that case, there's two other witnesses that can see it, so they're valid witnesses, and the victim cannot be a witness anyway, so he will not disqualify the others. But if indeed he could see, then that would be a problem of disqualifying the group. Okay, another question. Horeg v'robeya yasilu. What about the perpetrator himself, the murderer or the rapist? They can witness what happened, and they are also disqualified to be witnesses because they're related to themselves. And so in every case, the murderer presumably sees what he's doing, knows what he's doing, and therefore, even if there's 100 other people that are kosher witnesses that saw this, since the murderer himself or the rapist himself is there and is one of the witnesses and is disqualified, he will disqualify the whole group, and then you can never give capital punishment to such a person. Ishtik, Abaye had no answer to this. Ki ata lekamed rava amar le yakum davar be'mekayeme davar hakatum medaber. No, the pasuk says, based on 2 or 3 witnesses, yakum davar, a matter will be established. We only apply this rule in the Mishnah to witnesses that establish a matter, that they come to court and say, this is what happened. So it's only outside witnesses that see the action that's happening, and not the people involved in the crime itself. That this law does not apply to them, and this will answer all of the questions, whether it's the victim or the perpetrator. Yes, it's true, they are there, and they see what's going on and can talk about it, but they're not included in the group of the witness, such that it's just because they are disqualified, the witnesses are disqualified. No, we only look at those who are establishing the matter as external witnesses to the crime, and we don't count the people that were involved in the crime itself. Amar Rabbi Yosef, the Mishnah continues with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, who says this rule that if one of a group is a disqualified witness, then the whole group is thrown out, that is only applied in capital cases where we look for any reason to save the defendant. So here's another reason that we can throw them all out. But in the monetary case, we do not apply this, and if there's one invalid witness in a group, we throw out just the invalid witness, but the rest of them remain, and we apply their testimony to a monetary case. On that, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi disagrees and says, no, we apply this rule both to capital cases and also to monetary cases. If one of the group is a relative, then we throw out the entire group. And then the Mishnah continues at the end and says, Maya asu shene achim. The Mishnah teaches that we only apply this rule, that if one person is a relative, we throw out the whole group, if the person who is a relative or disqualified is one of the people who gave a warning. If at the time they saw this person is about to kill the other person and they gave a warning, this is not allowed, and you get capital punishment. If they gave a warning, it's clear that they intended to be a witness. However, if they did not give a warning, then they could just say, oh, I was just a bystander. I did not intend to be a witness. So if they gave a warning, it's clear that they intended to be part of the witnesses. And if that person who gave the warning is disqualified, then the whole group has to be disqualified. But if they didn't give any warning, then he could just say, oh, no, I'm not a witness. And then the other people who were witnesses can go on without him and won't disqualify the whole group. After all, the Mishnah says, what if there happens to be 2 brothers nearby when a murder happens? So then automatically the murderer gets away with murder because there happen to be 2 brothers somewhere nearby who witnessed it? That wouldn't make sense, that they should get away with that. So it's only if the 2 brothers gave a warning, then it's clear they intended to be witnesses, but they can't both be witnesses. And then so then the whole group would have to be thrown out. But otherwise, if they didn't give testimony, then we could just leave them out of the picture. and everybody else can testify. So now the Gemara asks about that case. When witnesses come, what do we say to them to see if they intended to be witnesses or just bystanders? We ask them, when did you come to observe or to be a witness? Right? When you came to that area and you saw something happening, or maybe you came because you heard some commotion, you said, I want to come to be a witness. Is that why? Or you just came to say, I want to be a bystander to see what's going on. If they said, we intended to be witnesses, in that case, if one of those people who said we came to be witnesses is a relative or is disqualified to be a witness, then the entire group that they're part of are all null and void. But if they say, no, we only came to look, to observe, but not to be official witnesses, then that's okay. Then everybody, they are excluded. Of course, those people, they intend to be witnesses and they're related. But everybody else can be witnesses, and we exclude them only, and they're not part of the group. Because otherwise, what would you do about two brothers that happen to see someone kill someone else? So then you'd never be able to give capital punishment to a murderer if there happen to be two brothers around? The answer is you can. They should just say, oh, yeah, we came to observe. We didn't intend to be witnesses. Okay, fine. Then go home, and everybody else who was there can be a witness. Itmar amar Rav Yehuda amar Shmuel halacha k'Rabbi Yoseh, Rav Nachman amar Omer halacha k'Rabbi. And finally, we have a halachic ruling that in the name Rav Yehuda, the name of Shmuel says halacha is like Rabbi Yoseh, that we only apply this rule to a capital case because we want to try to get the guy off. And so, if one of the witnesses is no good, the whole group is no good in a capital case. But in a monetary case, we accept the other witnesses. However, Rav Nachman says no, halacha is like Rabbi, who applies this rule both to capital cases and to monetary cases. Next Mishnah. היו שניים רואים אותו מחלון זה, או שניים רואים אותו מחלון זה, ואחד מתרה בו באמצע, בזמן שמקצתן רואים אלו את אלו, הרי אלו עדות אחת, ואם לאו, הרי אלו שתי עדויות. In order for a bunch of witnesses to be considered one group for all the halachot that we just mentioned, they actually have to be near each other, near enough that they can see each other. So, let's say there's a crime happening outside a window in the courtyard. There's two witnesses in one window watching it, and there's two witnesses in a different window on the other side. Let's take a simple case where they can see each other. They're just, one window here, one window there, and the witnesses are inside of each other. Then they all are one group. But if they're on two sides of a building and the witnesses, they can both see the crime, but they can't see each other, then they would be considered separate groups. And that would mean that if two of them were found edim zomemin, then those two would be killed. And the other group, they would be able to live and their testimony would be accepted, and so on. Now, what if there's two witnesses on one side of the building, two witnesses on the other side of the building? They can't see each other, but there is someone in the middle who's giving a warning. He's yelling out the window, hey, you better not do that, it's not allowed, and so on. And the witnesses, both sets of witnesses can see the guy who's giving the warning in the middle. That guy can act as a connector. So as long as some of the people can see each other, then it's all one testimony. But if there's some people who can't see anybody else, they can't see the other witnesses, and they cannot see the person that's giving the warning, then they're considered separate groups. לפיכך, אם נמצאת אחת מהן זוממת הוא והן נהרגין והשנייה פטורה. So if they are indeed separate groups because they can't see each other, then if one of the two, let's say these two witnesses become edim zomemin, so they will be killed, but the other set of witnesses, their testimony will be accepted, and there's nothing wrong with their testimony, and based on their testimony, we will say the guy outside did commit murder. So therefore, the defendant outside, the perpetrator, will be killed, and also the edim zomemin. And the other group will go free. In fact, their testimony is accepted. Whereas if you consider them all four people one group, and two of them became edim zomemin, then none of them would get capital punishment, because you can't give capital punishment unless all of them are found to be guilty, if they're one group. Rabbi Yoseh Omer, Le'olam en nehegin ad shiyu shnei adav, matrin bo shneimar al pi shenayim adim. Now Rabbi Yoseh has a disagreement regarding who does the warning. We just said that it could be a different person who does the warning. He happens happens to be nearby, he gives the warning, and the witnesses could be two people, and the person giving the warning, someone else. However, the Bioseh says, no, we do not give capital punishment unless the two witnesses are themselves the ones that give the warning. Because it says, Al pi shenaim adim, based on the word, the mouth of. What do you mean based on the mouth of? A simple reading is their testimony. But he's reading it as their warning. They have to give the warning to both of them. Another, well, since we quoted this pasuk, another interpretation of the pasuk is that the Sanhedrin has to hear the witnesses directly, al pi shenaim edim, in their language, and not with a translator. Translators, as good as they are, they're always going to change around some of the nuances, and so the judges have to understand the language of the witnesses in order to properly cross-examine them. אמר רב זוטרא בר טוביה אמר רב, מניין לעדות מיוחדת שהיא פסולה, שנאמר לא יומת על פי עד אחד. מה אחד? אילא מעד אחד ממש מרשע שמינן לה, על פי שניים עדים, אלא מה אחד? אחד. So regarding the beginning of this Mishnah that says, if the two, let's say it's two witnesses here and two witnesses there, and they do not see each other, then they are disjointed, and they do not count together. So Rav says, how do we know that disjointed testimony is no good? Let's say, for example, there's one witness on one side and only one witness on the other side. They do not join together. We know this because it says you do not kill a person based on one witness. So what do you mean one witness? If you mean literally that there's only one witness in total, well then I could figure that out from the beginning of the pasuk that says based on two witnesses you need to establish a fact of a case. So from the fact that I need two witnesses, I know that one is not enough. So why does the pasuk then have to go say, oh, and don't kill a person based on one witness? So I would already know if it's literally only one witness. Rather, the one is coming to teach me that if it's disjointed, as one here and one there, that they do not join together. That's true for one witness here, one witness there, then that's not going to, you don't have two witnesses at all. You don't have testimony at all. But if you have two witnesses here and two witnesses there, then you have valid testimony over here and valid testimony over there. They're considered two separate groups with all the leniencies and stringencies that come along with that. Tanya, we have a beraita that backs this up. Lo yumat al pi ayed echad, labi shenaim sheruin oto mechalon zeh, ve'echad mechalon zeh, ve'en ro'in zeh et zeh, she'en mistarefin. The beraita quotes the same pasuk and says, do not kill a person based on one witness. That includes not only if there's one witness in total, but also if there are two people that see something going on. One person is in one window and one person is in another window, but they can't see each other. They do not join together. It's only like one witness, which is only as powerful as one witness can be. And furthermore, let's say it's in the same window, but it's at different times. There's some crime happening outside. One person comes and he sees the crime for 1 minute, and he leaves. And then someone else comes a little bit after, and he sees the same crime is continuing to happen. It's a crime that takes a long time to finish. And he also sees the same crime. They also do not join together, even though they're in the same window, because they weren't there at the same time. If I already know from the beginning of this baraita that if you have one person in this window, one person in this window, and each of them are there the whole time and seeing the whole crime from beginning to end. Let's say the guy is lighting a fire on Shabbat, and so they see the whole incident of the lighting of fire from beginning to end. And yet, you say that they do not join together because they can't see each other. So, all the more so, if it's one after the other, where each one only sees half of the action, and half the action is like not quite the whole thing. And of course, they're not going to join together if each one only saw half the action, so why even bother saying a case like that? And the answer is, no, you would need that for a type of sin that is repeated and continues over a long time, like forbidden relations, where every moment that they are involved in it, the prohibition is being violated. And so it's all one act, but as long as they are together, that he is inside her, then that's the sin. And so it could be possible for this person to come and see the entire crime, because you just have to see that for a couple of seconds, and then they leave and someone else comes and they're still engaged in the same act. So the second person is also seeing the entire thing. So then I might think, well, they both saw the entire thing from the same window, just because there are different times, but they both saw the whole entire act, because the sin just is any moment. I might think that they join together, and that's why the Baraita teaches that case as well. Amar Rava, im hayu ro'in etam matreh o matreh ro'eh otan mitztarfin. Rava says, if the witness or witnesses see the person who's giving the warning, or the person giving warnings can see both of the witnesses, then that also joins together. That, as the Mishnah said, that person can be a link. Amar Rava, matreh shamru afilu mepi asmo, afilu mepi hashed. Rava says that the person who gives the warning could be anybody. It doesn't have to be a witness. It can even be the criminal himself. The criminal might say, right, I know that this is prohibited. I'm doing it on purpose. And I know that this is the warning. And that's why I'm doing it. I know this is a punishment. And that's why I'm doing it, to get this punishment. That also counts, because the purpose of the warning is to make sure that he knows that it's prohibited, to distinguish between shogeg and mezid. And even if it's said by a shed, doesn't mean literally a demon. It means some voice. We didn't identify where this voice came from. Someone screamed out and said, hey, this is not allowed. This is the punishment. So that's enough of a warning. It really doesn't matter who says the warning. Amar Rav Nachman, עדות מיוחדת כשרה בדיני מעונות, הכתיב, לא יומת על פי עד אחד בדיני נפשות הוא דאין כשרה, אבל בדיני מעונות כשרה. Nachman says, disjointed testimony. Let's say you have altogether two witnesses, one here and one on the other side, and they can't see each other. That's permitted, it's acceptable when it comes to monetary cases. See, monetary cases, we don't want to invalidate witnesses, because if you invalidate them, it's good for one side but bad for the other side. So it's not being lenient, it means being lenient on one side, but that could be taking away money that is deserving finally from the other side. So if there's testimony possible, we want to try to accept it. And this is based on a pasuk that says, do not kill a person based on one witness. Oh, that's only killing a person. We're going capital punishment. But if it's monetary case, then we can extract money. And again, this doesn't mean one witness in total. It means one here and one there. That's okay to, it's not okay to kill someone, but it is okay to use to extract money. מתקיף לרב זוטרא, אלא מעטה בדין נפשות תסיל, על המתנן הוא והן נהרגין קשיא. Rav Zutra says, if there is a case where you would accept such disjointed testimony, like in a monetary case, then why not also use it for a capital case in order to spare a person? So that if you have two witnesses in one window and two witnesses far away in another window who don't see each other, the Mishnah said that if one set of the witnesses becomes edim zomamin, then we disqualify them and we give them capital punishment. But the other two witnesses since they're disjointed, their testimony stands, and we kill the defendant. But if we can, in the monetary case, join them together, so why not also allow them to join together to save the defendant in this case? Because if you treat all four witnesses as one, even though they didn't see each other, but for leniency, treat them as one. And in that case, since some of them were found to be disqualified, then the whole group will be disqualified. They won't be killed because not all of them were found to be Adim Zomin, but two of them were found to be false witnesses, disqualified witnesses. So then the whole group would be thrown out to save the defendant. Don't we try to do everything to save a defendant? And we could do it by joining them together. And this is indeed a question that we leave standing. Rabbi Yosef Omer v'chule. Rabbi Yosef says that the witnesses have to be the ones that give the warning, not a third party. That's part of their job. Is that true that Rabbi Yosef says that it's the witnesses specifically? According to that, the point of the testimony is not only so that the defendant knows if it's mezid or shogeg, or if he has to know it's prohibited for it to be mezid to give him capital punishment. According to the Biyoseh, it's simply a formal part of the procedure. This is their job. The witnesses themselves have to say this. It's just a rule, according to Rabbi Yosef. So is that true? V'atanan Rabbi Yosef omer hasoneh neherag mipnei shu kemuad u'matreh. We have a Mishnah coming up later on Daf Tet Amud Bet, where Rabbi Yosef seems to be the same Tana. Standard Rabbi Yosef is Rabbi Yosef ben Chalafta. He says if someone is known that he hates someone else, then that is considered that he's already warned. If you know these two people are enemies, and then there's witnesses that says the person who hates that other guy, he got up and he killed him, but there was no warning, it's okay. You can still give him capital punishment because since everybody knows that he hates him and is trying to kill him, so then we assume that he had intention. It doesn't just happen to be that, oh look, who happened to drop this brick on this guy's head? His mortal enemy. No, that's not a mistake. He must have done it on purpose. So we see here that even though there's no warning, still we give capital punishment to the perpetrator without a warning. And the warning is only functional to make sure that he was mezid. Here we know he's mezid, so we don't need a warning. But Rabbi Yosef says you always need a warning, and that's to be the witnesses that give the warning no matter what. So we seem to have a contradiction. Amar le'ahu Rabbi Yosef bar Yehudahi. And so the answer, Abaye answers, that Mishnah on Daf Tet is actually a different Rabbi Yosef. It's Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda. Tetanya, Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda Omer, Chaver en tzarich hatra'ah lefi shelo nitena hatra'ah ela labchin ben shogeg lemezid. He said that a Chaver, that's someone who knows the laws and very careful with the laws, he does not require getting warned in order to be liable to punishment, if it's capital punishment or lashes, whatever the punishment is. For most people, you have to give them a warning to make sure that they know that this is mezid, so that you can, and they have to acknowledge it so they can get a capital punishment. But a chaver, we assume he already knows the law. And the reasoning is because the requirement for hatra'ah is only to distinguish between someone who does so by mistake and someone who does something on purpose. And a chaver knows. So you see that Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda says that a warning is only functional, and if it's not necessary in a particular case, then you don't have to do it. And that would be true for a chaver. It would also be true for someone who already hates someone else, so we assume that's premeditated because they already hate him. That's Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda. But Rabbi Yosef bar Chalafta would not agree with that, and he would say it's a formal part of the procedure, and always you need warning, and always the witnesses have to do it. The Mishnah continued and said, we also learn from these words, al pi, not only that Rabbi Yosef says that the witnesses have to be the ones to say the warning, but another matter that we learn from it is that the Sanhedrin cannot hear through a interpreter. They have to hear from the peh, directly from the mouth of the witnesses, so that they can catch every meaning of the words that they say. One time, there were people that spoke a foreign language, and they came to judgment, and they came as witnesses to Rava, or they came to judgment before Rava. And Rava put an interpreter between them, and he's listening to them. He's talking to them through an interpreter. How could he do that? The Mishnah just said that the Sanhedrin has to listen to the litigants and the witnesses directly, and not from an interpreter. And the answer is Rava knew the language, but he had passive, not active knowledge of the language. So he understood what they were saying without the interpreter. That's sufficient. But we wanted to answer, you have to know a language a lot better to speak the language than to understand the language. So we wanted to answer them or ask them questions that he would do through an interpreter. That's okay. You could speak to the litigants and the witnesses with an interpreter, but he understood the language well enough to hear and understand everything that they said. Final story. One time you had these two people, Ilah and Tuvia, and they signed on a promissory note. Now they were relatives of the guarantor of the loan. But Papa thought it should be okay because they're not related to the lender and the borrower, and therefore those are the main parties, the lender and the borrower. The guarantor is just there just in case, so he's really a side point, and it doesn't matter that the two witnesses are related to the guarantor. However, he found out that was wrong. Amar le Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua Rav Papa ilet le lelove la batal alva azil malve. Rav Huna, the son of Yehuda, told Rav Papa, let's say the borrower doesn't have money to be able to pay back. So who's going to come? Who's going to pay back? The lender's going to go to the guarantor. So the guarantor is really standing in for the borrower and may actually have to pay. And if the witnesses are related to the guarantor, then that's no good. And so he said, nope, they cannot be related, not even to the guarantor. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'amen.